The day I almost got arrested for shoveling snow was the day I accidentally uncovered a $32,000 embezzlement scheme. And yeah, I know how that sounds. All I wanted was to clear my driveway in peace, maybe get to work without frostbite, maybe not throw my back out before 8 a.m. Instead, I ended up in a legal showdown with the HOA president, discovered I owned the street she lived on, and watched her get sentenced to prison. You can't make this stuff up. It started at 7 in the morning, 15 degrees, wind slicing through my jacket like it had a personal vendetta. I'd been outside since 6, shoveling 2 feet of overnight Michigan snow off my driveway in Sterling Heights. My shoulders were burning, my gloves were stiff with ice, and I'd piled the snow neatly on my own front lawn, like every normal human being in the Midwest has done since the invention of the shovel. That's when Brenda Morrison came storming across the street in her designer parka, waddling fast like an angry penguin with authority issues. "Excuse me, Robert Daniels," she screeched, loud enough to scare the crows out of the trees. "What do you think you're doing?" I leaned on my shovel and just stared at her for a second. You ever know a conversation's going to be stupid before it even starts? Yeah, that. Shoveling snow, Brenda. Same as everyone else. You cannot pile snow on your lawn like that. It is unsightly and against HOA regulations. Unsightly. It was snow. In Michigan. In February. She had her phone out taking pictures like I'd dumped toxic waste instead of frozen water. Section 12, Paragraph 4, Aesthetic Standards, Property Values. She recited it like she was arguing before the Supreme Court. I laughed. I couldn't help it. Where exactly would you like me to put it? Mail it to Florida? If you don't remedy this immediately, I will call the authorities. The police? I said. You're calling 911 because I shoveled snow onto my own lawn? Yes. Yeah, that happened. 20 minutes later, a Sterling Heights patrol car pulled up. Officer Patterson stepped out looking like a man who knew he was about to waste 15 minutes of his life he'd never get back. "Let me guess," I said, walking down my driveway. "Illegal snow?" He flipped through his notepad, glanced at my perfectly reasonable snow piles, then glanced across the street where Brenda was peeking through her curtains like a villain in a low-budget sitcom. "Sir," he said slowly, "you shoveled snow from your driveway onto your own property? That's the crime." He closed his notebook. "That's not illegal. Please don't call 911 over civil HOA disputes," he told Brenda when she ran out mid-departure. Her face turned a shade of purple I didn't know humans could achieve. I thought that was the end of it. It wasn't. Over the next week, I got 3 letters. First a warning. Then an escalation. Then a hearing notice with mandatory attendance and a fine of $100 per day, retroactive, plus $500 for willful noncompliance. For snow. The night before the hearing, I was digging through my closing documents out of pure stubbornness. I'd only lived there 2 years, corner lot, little extra yard space. One of the reasons I bought it. I started looking closer at the old surveys. Something felt off. The property line didn't stop where I thought it did. I spent 3 hours cross-checking county records online, calling the clerk's office, comparing parcel numbers. And what I found, I actually had to sit down. When the original developer of Meadowbrook Estates went bankrupt years ago, there was confusion during the asset sale. My deed, recorded, stamped, verified, included not just my lot. It included Oakwood Drive, the entire street, 2 blocks of it, including the stretch directly in front of Brenda's house. I called my attorney, Michael Chin. Sent him everything. 2 hours later he called back, and I could hear him smiling through the phone. "Robert, you own the street. Let that sink in. The HOA president threatening to fine me for snow lived on my private property." Now, I wasn't looking to go full cartoon villain. But leverage? That was leverage. That night at the HOA meeting, about 20 neighbors showed up for what they thought would be a routine snow shaming. Brenda sat at the front with Gary and Susan, acting like they were presiding over a war tribunal. They read my charges. $2,000 in fines. Michael stood up calmly. Explained the covenant language was vague. Unenforceable. Then he said, "There's another issue." I stood, held up the survey maps and deed copies. "I own Oakwood Drive." Silence. You could hear the HVAC humming. Brenda blinked like I'd started speaking another language. Michael passed out copies. County confirmed. It was never transferred to the HOA. Half the homes in that neighborhood only had access via Oakwood Drive. Technically I could gate it. Brenda called it blackmail. Michael corrected her. "No, this is negotiation. I offered something simple. drop the snow nonsense, apologize for calling the police, and I'd grant a permanent easement for free. Gary and Susan whispered furiously in the corner, while Brenda looked like she might spontaneously combust. Finally, she apologized, through clenched teeth. It was an overreaction. I got it in writing. I thought that would end it. It didn't. 2 weeks later, I got a letter from a law firm challenging my ownership, claiming bankruptcy paperwork errors. Intimidation tactics. Michael shredded it in a response. 3 weeks later, their tone changed, suddenly acknowledging my ownership but arguing implied easement. Back and forth. Months. Then spring hit. And Brenda found new things to complain about. My shrubs weren't on the approved plant list. There was no approved plant list. She literally drafted one after the fact and sent it to me. That's when I stopped playing defense. As a homeowner, I had a right to inspect HOA financials. So I requested them. What I found made the snow look adorable. The HOA collected about $30,000 a year. Nearly half, $15,000 annually, went to something called Morrison Property Management, owned by her husband, Donald Morrison. Over 3 years, $47,000 paid out. Invoices vague. No contracts. No detailed deliverables. Some services billed twice. Landscaping charges at Brenda's house. A conference trip to Florida that didn't exist. I brought it to Michael. He leaned back in his chair and said, "If this wasn't disclosed properly, that's a fiduciary breach. Possibly criminal." So I used the bylaws. Needed 10% of homeowners to call a special meeting. I went door to door. Most neighbors were apathetic until I showed them numbers. Then the anger set in. 12 signatures. The meeting was packed. I brought a projector. I laid it out clean. Calm. Just facts. The room went from confused to furious. Even Gary looked shaken. Susan admitted she didn't know about the conflict of interest. Vote to hire an independent forensic auditor? 58-7. The audit took a month. When Jennifer Park delivered her findings, the clubhouse was dead silent. $32,000 in questionable expenses. Evidence of self-dealing. Likely embezzlement. Recommendation: refer to law enforcement. 2 days later, Sterling Heights detectives showed up at Brenda's door. She resigned for health reasons. Yeah. Months later, charges were filed. Embezzlement and fraud. Both Brenda and Donald pleaded guilty to reduced charges. 2 years with 1 suspended, probation restitution. The day she reported to prison, I was planting flowers in my yard. Patricia Hughes, retired teacher, calm, reasonable, had become the new HOA president. First thing she did? Issue a formal apology to me. Second thing? Cut dues by 20% since they weren't paying a fake management company anymore. We turned Oakwood Drive into the site of our first block party that summer. Kids running around. Grills going. Laughter instead of tension. Patricia joked over a microphone, "Thanks to Robert for letting us use his street." I yelled back, "I just wanted to shovel snow." And that's the truth. I never wanted to be some neighborhood hero. I didn't wake up thinking, "Today I expose corruption." I just refused to be bullied over something small. And that's the thing, small boundaries matter. If I had caved and hauled snow off my lawn like she demanded, I would have told her she could push me anytime she wanted. And who knows how long that money would have kept disappearing. 2 winters later, I still shovel my driveway. I pile the snow neatly on my lawn. Nobody says a word. Tom, who bought Brenda's old house, once asked me if I ever felt bad about how it all ended. I told him no. I feel bad it had to go that far. But she had choices. She could have left me alone. Could have disclosed the conflict. Could have acted with integrity. She didn't. Accountability isn't cruelty. It's consequence. So here's the question I'll leave you with. If you were in my boots that morning, freezing at 7 a.m., being told you were a criminal for shoveling snow, would you have backed down? Or would you have stood your ground and risked the whole fight? Because sometimes justice doesn't start with a courtroom. Sometimes it starts with a shovel, a line in the snow, and one person saying, "No, tell me what you would have done." Have you ever stood up to someone abusing a little bit of power? Or did you let it slide? I'm curious, because you never know what might be hiding under something as simple as a pile of snow.